So in today's increasingly connected world, any one of us, you or I, can become the target of deepfakes. We've tried to explain to you through the course of this special show what you can do in terms of the popular proverb, prevention is better than cure or remedy. But just in case something like this was to chance upon one of us, well, then we've got the right set of experts to give you the remedy as well. I'm joined by a stellar panel on this special show. I have with me Nappinai and Pavan Duggal, cyber law experts, policy wonks, people who understand this space better than anyone. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Ms. Nappinai, I'd like to start off by asking you. Now, we've been trying to explain through the course of the show what is a deepfake. How can you really spot the difference between what's real and what's fake? But now this is far-reaching, the implications of what's happening. It's not just celebrities. Earlier, you needed data sets which were so much more in terms of high-quality images, audio, and video. Now, even a small preview can generate a deepfake. Any one of us with a social media personality or presence can be sort of fabricated and distorted in such a way. So if I'm a citizen of India right now, and if I would find myself in such a mess, the target of such a deepfake campaign, what remedies are available to me? What can I do to really fix this, Ms. Nappinai?
So the lowest hanging fruit in this is to approach the platform where the deepfake content is being hosted. See, often when we look at these larger problems, you assume because technology is evolving and you get newer kinds of crimes or violations, you think that law is not keeping pace with technology and you do not have remedies. So I thought very quickly I will point out that you don't have to worry about law changing as and when technology is evolving. Existing law can be applied given the situation if the fact circumstances match the provisions. But as I told you, the first and the easiest remedy is to approach the platform and ask for this content to be taken down by red flagging it as deepfake. The second level is to approach the grievance officer. This is also under the information technology rules, which came out in 2021 and has gone through 2 changes up to 2023. So you have the right to approach the grievance officer. You have multiple timelines. If the deepfake pertains to nudity, the timeline for a takedown is 24 hours. And it extends up to 15 days with a multiple layer of 24 hours, then 72 hours, and then the final timeline for them to revert, if not to take down, is 15 days. So you do have remedies under the Information Technology Act for a takedown without having to go file a separate civil case or a criminal case, etc. But you have your remedies under civil and criminal law too. You have your offenses under the Information Technology Act, including cheating by personation or impersonation, as we call it in colloquial language. Similarly, under IPC also we had a similar section. But when something is done using digital technology, you can use the Information Technology Act. So you have multiple layers of remedy, and you don't have to worry that you don't have any remedy and that you are at the, you are powerless. So this is something that's critical and the message that I would want to share off the bat.
Okay, so that is in theory very reassuring. But Mr. Duggal, when it comes to really following this in practice, and given I saw there was a recent report with the cybersecurity helpline here in Maharashtra where people are trying to register, cases of fraud and impersonation, and they were getting no response whatsoever. So in terms of the backlog and the fact that this can be done using advanced machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms, the volumes can be many. Right now, we're seeing slightly sophisticated ones, high levels of sophistication with deep faking experts who are working on these celebrity pieces. We were trying to showcase earlier in the show how we could do it with each one of us on the Tech Today team as well. What is it like in practice, Mr. Duggal? Is it actually easy to enforce, some of your remedies under the Information Technology Act and rules?
Well, the reality is that the remedies under the Information Technology Act 2000 and the rules are often illusionary in nature, primarily because they are existing on paper, but trying to get them implemented through the relevant grievance redressal mechanisms of the various intermediaries becomes a tall challenge. This is so because despite the law mandating them to do the grievance redressal within the stipulated period, most of the time, the intermediaries don't even land up acknowledging your grievance petition within the first 24 hours as mandated under law, nor do they land up pulling down that content. Yes, if you're a Rashmika, Mandana, or if you're somebody who's a public personality, maybe you'll be more lucky and get your things pulled down quickly. But if you're a common man who doesn't have much claim to fame, then I think you will have to have a longer wait. I think this is a scenario which needs to change. We need to really provide effective remedies to affected persons rather than just paper tigers. And more significantly, now with deepfakes coming in, almost anybody and everybody could be a potential target of a deepfake, audio or a video or an image. Having said that, the time for providing them effective remedy is right now. And that would mean now even going ahead and making further changes under the IT Rules 2021. That means coming up with new rules under Section 87 of the Information Technology Act. And that also means sensitizing the said intermediaries about the need for snatching away the statutory exemption from legal liability if they fail to pull down content which is primarily misuse of deepfake as a paradigm.
Just after this whole controversy erupted earlier this week, we had the IT minister coming out and clarifying what some of these rules are on paper, and also encouraging people who've been the target of such a deepfake attack to also go file an FIR and seek appropriate remedy. But, it's revelatory what you're saying, Mr. Duggal, because when you look at the larger scenario, it is absolutely mind-boggling with the amount of content that is available on these social media apps. We're not just talking about big tech with Google and Meta and perhaps Snapchat and the others. There's no TikTok over here, at least without a VPN. But then there's also the regional social media apps. And then we've seen that there's several such instances on Telegram of deepfakes being circulated in closed groups. They've been pulled up globally. We're seeing regulations in different parts of the world. China has been a pioneer in terms of regulating this, but it's very different in China when you talk about regulation, very different subjective definitions. How do we really hold these tech companies and content companies liable with the current laws of the land here in India, Mr. Duggal?
Well, the current laws are thoroughly inadequate, primarily with the advent of newly emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, and now deepfake coming in. I think we will have to make one singular message very clear in the ecosystem. That is, just because you are an intermediary, don't think that you have an automatic, shall I say, entitlement to exemption from legal liability. You will have to show exercise of due diligence. Most of the intermediaries have till today failed to exercise due diligence, nor is evidence of their due diligence actually visible either on the websites or in the public domain. Further, in India, because there is no exact penal consequences, that's the reason why most of the intermediaries say, we subscribe to the Indian Jugaad School of Management, and we will continue to keep on doing Jugaad till such time we are in a sticky situation. Well, Rule 7 of the IT Rules 2021 does provide that the moment the intermediaries don't comply with these rules, they are bound to be snatched away from their potential exposure to legal liability, in the sense that statutory exemption will be snatched away, and also they'll become liable for punishment under the IT Act and the Indian Penal Code. But the reality is, in the last 2.5 years, there's been no singular criminal action under the IT Rules 2021 to give that deterrent kind of a message. So I think the message of deterrence lies more in enforcement of existing laws. Deterrence lies more in making specific new laws for newly emerging technologies. Like we talked about China, 15th of August 2023, China has implemented the world's first law on generative AI, where it's put in a huge chunk of responsibility to AI service providers and algorithm creators in terms of making them accountable vis-a-vis what is going to be the outcome of the algorithm. Clearly, when we are talking about audits in artificial intelligence, that's the right step in the right direction. But in India, we don't have much of these legal frameworks in place. India has become the most populous nation in the world, but it's time that India should now leapfrog in its existing cyber legal frameworks onto new benchmarking standards which other nations can follow.
It's interesting because while we talk about building trust and safety with some of these mechanisms, and you see a lot of public figures speaking out, especially when something like this happens with a celebrity or someone influential, it's important to note that these are actually the rarest users of deepfakes. While they get a lot of traction, some of the research that we were doing says that the main victims of this disruptive tech, Ms. Nappinai, are women, unsuspecting, innocent women who don't even know that some of these footage of their private lives have now made it onto pornographic websites by generating deepfakes and stuff like that. There's actually an interesting stat that deepfake pornography makes up to 98% of all deepfake videos found online, and 99% of those victims are women. Ms. Nappinai, also a huge chunk of this whole menace is in Korea with K-drama and K-pop idols. I wanted to get your thoughts on, do you think this is the real threat which we need to address immediately? Because we don't even know, we can only see the tip of the iceberg. We don't even know what the real problem, the gravity of the situation really is.
Indeed. So, there is an interesting take on this, and that's something I'd like to share.
Sure.
Now, what Mr. Duggal had already pointed out about how on paper law may be very utopian and effective, but in reality it may not be so. We saw that in action in one case where actual rape videos were uploaded, and when the victims complained to the social media platforms, it was not taken down. Thereafter, when an NGO complained, again it was not taken down. And then the NGO sent a letter to the Chief Justice of India, and it was registered as a suo motu writ petition by the Supreme Court. It goes under the name of Prajwala versus Union of India, where the case was about violent videos and recommendations for protection of women and children online. So we are talking about how technology can be misused in terms of impacting women and children.
Yeah.
Now, this was a case, and from India, and thanks to the Supreme Court of India, where we learned about how we could use technology to fight crime. So the same artificial intelligence which is harming women through deepfakes, etc., was what I had, in fact, as amicus, I had proposed in this case, that we should use artificial intelligence to root out this kind of content, which is either nudity or violent imagery of women and children, from online platforms or chat apps. You mentioned about chat apps also earlier, and it's very difficult to root out content from there.
Yes.
So here was an initiative through the Supreme Court where we said we should use artificial intelligence to root it out at the stage of upload, meaning from the time when it is uploaded, but before it hits public platforms. The outcome of this case is some very, very effective consensus-mediated mechanisms which came out for speedier remedies for victims.
Right.
So it is correct that platforms may not react quickly, as this case itself points out. But after this case, what the change that happened was, when it is an offense against a woman or a child, now you do have a separate button to report on all the big, or I should say big tech platforms, right? Because they were part of the consensus mediated process. So the advantage you get when you, and this was such a simple solution to a difficult problem,
Yeah.
So the minute you have a button which is specific, and the platform knows that if it is a report under this, I have to act immediately and within 24 hours, then they have no excuse thereafter. If they don't act within 24 hours, they lose the protection that law gives them under Section 79, which is called a safe harbor, which is that if it is third-party content, then the platform is not liable. But if they fail to act within the time stipulated, then they also become liable for that content. So that is, we say samadhana beda danda. So there is a danda which goes with failure to comply with the law also. And that is what ensures the effectiveness of a law. The reason I mentioned Prajwala is that was the case which then led to the intermediary guidelines being modified. To the extent that the intermediary guidelines doesn't capture all the remedies, you still have the Supreme Court order which prevails, because any order of the Supreme Court is also a precedent law. So today for victims, you have your remedies under the Act and the rules. You also have a remedy because of the order passed by the Supreme Court in this case. And this is not that well known, and therefore I wanted to spotlight.
Fair enough. No, fair enough. Mr. Duggal, it seems like a double-edged sword, because largely there's AI, complex AI algorithms, which we were explaining earlier on in the show, a lot of machine learning involved over here as well. And there are benefits. There's a lot of pros and cons. This bit obviously are the deleterious or the slightly harmful or very harmful ramifications of using this technology. But deep fakes, so to speak, that's just how we call them colloquially, can also have a lot of positive, uses if it's in education, in healthcare. Even all of us here in the media and film fraternity use them to reproduce a lot of, news situations where we couldn't possibly be a part of it. So there are, positive uses. We're talking about some of the deleterious impacts as well. But what concerns me is as we head here in India towards election season, Mr. Duggal, this can be a huge cause for concern if we're talking about building these transparency and accountability systems. Don't you think this is something that, well, the powers that be should be working on with full alacrity, given that this has happened all over the world? We've seen this happening in Ukraine, in the US. Technology like this has been used to meddle with elections. Is that a cause for concern here in India?
This is a cause for massive concern in India. India is already in the election age, 2022, 23, 24. Elections are around the corner. I think in the 2024 general elections, deepfakes are going to play a very important role in trying to potentially swing the thought processes of potential electorates. And because the stakeholders realize that there is no specific direct legal provisions pertaining to deepfakes, and in case if you're using deepfakes via the darknet and specifically using via artificial intelligence, there's no way the law enforcement agencies of the world can potentially even track you. So I would see that as a huge factor, which all kinds of stakeholders in the political ecosystem would want to potentially use. And at the end of the day, we have to realize in India, people are by and large very, very trusting. They still trust what they see online without them going ahead and independently verifying the authenticity or veracity of content. So the chances of using deepfakes as a catalyst, as a means for disrupting democratic processes in a country like India pretty much exist and are pretty bright. And they get more bright because of the fact that there are no legal frameworks in this regard to regulate the same. The Election Commission of India needs to do quite a lot just to go ahead and curb this potential misuse. It's not the technology that we are concerned with. It's the misuse of technology for Western purposes that needs to be really come down with a strong hand.
Ms. Nappinai, just building on that point, if you see some of the deepfakes that were being used around the world 6 months or maybe 12 months ago, you could spot that with some of the things we mentioned on the show earlier, with the way the eyes were moving or how the color was not matching. That was kind of easy. Now, if we see the current set of them, the technology has grown in leaps and bounds. I want to get your thoughts over there as well. Do you see that also as a massive concern? Because now I'll build on this. In fact, there was a case in the US where it was a custody case between a husband and wife for their child. And just to prove something, the mother of the child used a deepfake audio to establish some evidence against the father of the child. The judge, in that scenario, it took them such a long time to even decipher whether this was a deepfake or the original. This will be a real concern even for the courts, Ms. Nappinai, to really, and for all of us consumers, to really tell how fake is a deepfake or how real does it get?
Now, there are two problems to this. The first and foremost is if you look at the evidence laws of India, they are already very convoluted and they make reliance on electronic evidence very difficult. Now you have a situation where you have technology-enabled fabricated imagery, and if a court were to rely on something and they ask for proof, just look at the extent to which electronic evidence, which was otherwise considered as a good evidence or best evidence, is now going to get thrown out, saying unless and until it is proven beyond reasonable doubt, then we are not going to rely on it. And often it may not always be that easy for us to establish. So some of the things I just would point out is one, internationally, yes, this is a huge problem. We've already seen not just celebrities who are actors being victims to this, but also politicians. And, you react on a trigger, and that trigger can be a deep fake. And then you think about and analyze in leisure. But by then, the harm may already be caused. So if you look at the trends across the world, European Union is leading right now with its proposed AI Act, and they have made this into the second level of, the first level is AI usage, which is absolutely impermissible. The
Yeah.
second level is permissible, but with some checks and balances. So one of the things they are suggesting as the check and balance is that if you're going to create a deep fake and
Mhm.
you're going to circulate it, then you have to give a transparency report that this
Well,
is deepfake generated content. So we are at the cusp of new laws in India with the Digital
fair
India
enough.
coming. So you can evaluate having similar provisions included and criminalize such use of deepfake, which is intended to either for dishonest or fraudulent purpose or for harming someone's reputation or
Mhm.
for using as real in a court of law too. So if we have, by the way, just to highlight, you already have a provision which says if you fabricate a document, and document
Mhm.
includes electronic record, and if you
Yes.
use it in a court of law as if it is real, then you
Yes.
can be punished for it. So you don't
I'll,
need an AI law to come in it, but at
yeah.
the same time, having something specific will act as a deterrence.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Mr. Duggal, what I really find interesting is just donning my legal hat and tossing it into the ring. From a jurisdiction standpoint, this is going to be a huge headache. And just talking about some of these social media platforms, supposing a deep fake of me was doing the rounds on TikTok as a social media platform, I would never have access to some of these remedies here in India, but it's become a viral video in the US and in China. It's still doing my reputation a lot of harm. But what kind of remedies could I seek over there? I'm just painting a hypothetical scenario for you, Mr. Duggal, but that's the scale of this in terms of how global this problem really will be. And we'll need that sort of coordination to ever tackle this menace.
So when internet came and made geography history, everybody thought, well, this is just a passing fad. The coming of national laws further tried to localize the internet sensation and said national laws would apply to the internet. But now, with the coming of newly emerging technologies like AI and deepfake,
Yeah.
the issue of internet jurisdiction gets far more confounded. The reason for this is your national laws are only applicable within your national boundaries. And much that you would want to give them extra territorial applicability, we would still not be successful. Case in point is the Information Technology Act 2000, which has been granted extraterritorial jurisdiction and applicability. But in the last 23 years, we have not been able to extend it beyond the territorial boundaries of the country. Having said that, once in the hypothetical case that you mentioned, should your deep fake video be viral in those countries while you are located in India, your maximum, at best, remedies would be only to try to reach up to the relevant portals there and seek the deletion or removal of such content. But then it's going to be not at all very effective. And there'll be no, shall I say, encouragement or inclination on the part of the service providers to even go ahead and entertain your request, because the request is coming from a citizen of a country where these social media platforms do not have a sole presence, or which is not a big market for them at the current
or
time.
they are banned, or in this case, a massive platform which is banned in our country. Hence my concern.
Absolutely. And once you're banned, there's no way you can be forced to go ahead and do that, because the presumption is because you're banned, you should not be available. It's a different matter altogether that using the double backdoor route or through the VPNs, they are still being made available. But I think this is a global problem. And that's why the United Nations Ad Hoc Committee on Cybercrime is now trying to come up with a new chapter on and provisions on internet jurisdiction in the proposed International Convention on cybercrime, or to regulate the misuse of ICTs for criminal purposes. But it's still a long, long haul and a long journey ahead.
Mr. Duggal, Ms. Nappinai, it's been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on this special show. And I think we need to continue to have these conversations to get to the bottom of this. This is only going to, grow exponentially. And we need to find solutions on forum like this. Thank you so much for joining us on this special broadcast. We appreciate it.